Scientists just confirmed something off the coast of the United States that sounds like it belongs in a disaster movie, except this one is real, and it is happening right now, deep under the ocean, where no human eye can see it. A massive tectonic plate sitting beneath the Pacific Northwest is tearing itself apart, piece by piece, and new pictures taken from deep underground prove it is happening faster than anyone expected. One single crack in this plate has already dropped a shocking 5 kilometers straight down. To put that in a way you can actually picture, that is like stacking 3 Mount Everests on top of each other, and then dropping that whole stack downward into the Earth. This is not a guess. This is not a computer model pretending to show the future. This is an actual picture of the ground breaking apart, captured by real scientists using real equipment, and it was published just weeks ago. And here's the part that should really grab your attention. This exact plate sits directly underneath one of the most watched and most feared earthquake zones on the entire planet, a place called the Cascadia subduction zone. This is the same zone capable of producing a magnitude 9 earthquake, one of the strongest and most destructive kinds of earthquakes that exist anywhere on Earth. So why is this plate breaking apart right now? What does a tear 5 kilometers deep actually mean for the millions of people living above it in places like Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver? And is this the first sign of something bigger still to come, or is it something else entirely? We are going to answer every single one of those questions in this video using only what scientists have actually found, not fear, not guesswork, just the real science laid out clearly so you can understand exactly what is happening beneath your feet. Before we go further, if you find stories like this valuable, hitting like and subscribing genuinely helps more than you might think, because research like this takes real time and real effort to track down, understand, and explain clearly, and your support helps keep that work going. Now let us walk through exactly what scientists found, how they found it, and why so many researchers are calling this one of the most important discoveries in earthquake science in years. Let us start with a simple question. Have you ever actually felt the ground shake beneath you? Maybe it was a small tremor that barely rattled a cup on your table, or maybe it was something bigger that made you grab onto a doorway. If you have felt an earthquake before, drop a comment and tell us where you were standing and what it actually felt like in that moment. So many people have shared their stories in earlier videos, and honestly, every single one of them is worth reading. There is something powerful about hearing directly from people who have felt the earth move beneath them, because it turns a scientific topic into something real and personal. So please, share your story below, because it genuinely helps everyone else watching understand what this kind of event actually feels like in real life, not just in theory. Now let us go back to where this entire discovery actually began. In the year 2021, a research ship called the Marcus G. Langseth sailed out into the ocean near Vancouver Island. The ship did not carry weapons or cameras pointed at the surface of the water. Instead, it carried powerful equipment designed to send strong sound waves deep down into the ocean floor. Once those sound waves hit something solid underground, they bounce back up toward the surface, and scientists carefully study exactly how those waves return. This method is called seismic reflection imaging. Think of it like an ultrasound, the same kind of technology doctors use to look inside a human body, except in this case, scientists are using it to look deep inside the body of planet Earth itself. This entire mission had an official name. It was called Cascadia 21, which is short for the Cascadia Seismic Imaging Experiment of 2021. The person leading this expedition was a geophysicist named Suzanne Carbotte, who works at Columbia University's Lamont-Doherty Earth Observatory, one of the most respected earth science research centers in the world. For years, her team worked on collecting and studying the data gathered during that expedition. And when their results were finally published this year in a well-respected scientific journal called Science Advances, even the scientists who had been studying this region for years were genuinely stunned by what they saw. Here's exactly what they found. The Juan de Fuca plate is a massive slab of ocean floor that has been slowly sliding underneath the coast of North America for a very long time. For decades, scientists assumed this plate moved downward as one single, solid piece, kind of like a giant sheet of rock sliding smoothly beneath the surface. But that is not what these new images show at all. Instead, the plate is tearing apart. It is fragmenting into smaller separate pieces as it sinks deeper into the Earth's mantle, which is the hot, thick layer of rock sitting beneath the Earth's outer crust. The lead author of this new study, a geologist named Brandon Shuck from Louisiana State University, described this discovery in a way that is easy for anyone to understand. He said, "This is a subduction zone dying piece by piece instead of collapsing all at once." Read that sentence again, because it really is the heart of this entire story. A subduction zone is the area where one of Earth's tectonic plates slides underneath another one. And for a very long time, scientists believed that when a subduction zone eventually slows down and shuts off, it probably happens gradually and evenly across the whole system. What nobody actually had, until now, was clear, direct proof of exactly how that shutdown process happens in real life. This expedition is officially the very first time anyone has ever captured clear images of this process actually happening. Not predicted, not modeled on a computer, but actually observed with real data. And based on everything researchers have found so far, this process is anything but small or gentle. Along one major fault line beneath the ocean floor, the sinking plate has already dropped a full 5 kilometers straight down. Let that number really sink in for a second. This is not some tiny hairline crack buried harmlessly underground with no real consequence. This is an enormous slab of solid rock, roughly the size of a small country, that has been physically torn and sheared apart by the incredible forces at work deep inside our planet. Suzanne Carbotte herself, the lead scientist behind this expedition, called it the clearest picture anyone has ever captured of this exact geological process. Scientists have understood for a long time that subduction can slow down when lighter material reaches the boundary zone between two plates. But actually seeing this mechanism captured in real physical data is something completely different. It changes how scientists are able to study this process moving forward, because now they have real evidence instead of only theories. So here's the big question everyone naturally wants answered next. What does a fracturing, fragmenting tectonic plate actually mean for the people who live directly above it? This is genuinely the point in the story where things shift from fascinating science into something with much more serious real-world stakes. The Cascadia subduction zone runs along this exact stretch of coastline, and it is capable of producing one of the most dangerous and destructive earthquakes anywhere on the entire planet. If the entire margin of this fault were to rupture all at once, scientists believe it would likely register above magnitude 9 on the earthquake scale. To put that into perspective, a magnitude 9 earthquake is an extremely rare and extremely powerful event, capable of causing massive damage across huge areas of land. The last confirmed megathrust earthquake along this exact zone happened back in the year 1700, which means it has now been well over 3 centuries since that last major event. Because of this, many geologists believe that certain sections of this fault are now considered overdue for another major rupture at some point in the future. For a long time, scientists have known that the Cascadia subduction zone does not behave like one single uniform fault line running smoothly from one end to the other. Different sections of this fault lock together, slip, and eventually rupture in noticeably different ways compared to other sections nearby. And for years, nobody fully understood exactly why these differences existed along the same fault system. This brand new discovery might finally offer scientists a real physical explanation for that long-standing mystery. Think about it this way. If the plate feeding into this subduction zone is already fractured and broken apart before it even goes underground, then stress inside the Earth is naturally going to build up differently than scientists previously assumed. This fragmentation could actually be reshaping exactly where pressure builds up over time, and it could be influencing how violently that pressure eventually gets released during an earthquake. Researchers who are currently studying this new data say that it could genuinely force scientists to rewrite parts of Cascadia's earthquake forecasting models. That is not a small or casual claim to make about a fault system that has already been studied so closely for so many decades. These exact forecasting models are the tools that emergency planners in cities like Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver actually depend on when preparing their communities for a future disaster. To really understand why this matters so much, it helps to look back at the last major Cascadia earthquake, which happened in the year 1700. That earthquake sent an enormous tsunami racing all the way across the entire Pacific Ocean, eventually reaching the coast of Japan. Villagers in Japan recorded a strange and completely unexplained wave that arrived on their shores with no local earthquake ever felt beforehand. Historians eventually gave this event a name. They called it an orphan tsunami, because it was a wave that had been separated entirely from the distant earthquake that actually caused it. It took scientists centuries to finally connect that recorded wave in Japan back to its true source, the Cascadia Fault sitting thousands of miles away on the other side of the ocean. That connection ended up helping researchers estimate both the size and the exact timing of that powerful 1700 rupture event. On top of that, tree ring records collected along the Pacific Northwest coast further confirmed the same striking historical timeline. Entire forests made up of cedar trees died suddenly all at once, drowned when the land beneath them dropped downward during that massive earthquake. Remarkably, those same dead forests, now known as ghost forests, are still standing today along parts of the coastline. They serve as silent physical evidence of a subduction zone rupturing violently right beneath them centuries ago. This brand new discovery about the fragmenting Juan de Fuca plate adds an entirely new layer to that same long, evolving scientific story surrounding Cascadia. But here's the part of this discovery that actually surprised researchers even more than the fault itself. This fragmentation process is not just happening in isolation off the coast of Vancouver Island, completely separate from everything else happening on the planet. The research team studying this data believes that fragments like the ones they found could finally help explain a decades-old geological mystery found in completely different parts of the world. For years, geologists working in various locations around the globe have discovered strange, mismatched pieces of ancient oceanic plate buried in unexpected places. These fragments never seem to match up with any tectonic system that is currently visible or actively moving anywhere on Earth today. In other words, what is happening right now beneath the Pacific Northwest might not actually be a unique, one-time event at all. It might instead be the very same natural process that shaped strange geological mysteries found all over the world millions of years ago. Scientists now believe we may be watching in real time at a process that has quietly repeated itself across our planet for millions and millions of years. Until this expedition took place, nobody had ever actually caught this exact process happening in real time, in the act, with real data to prove it. And that is precisely why scientists working across many different fields of study are paying such close attention to this one specific research study. Now, let us be completely clear about something important, because this part matters just as much as the discovery itself. This discovery does not mean that a major earthquake is coming tomorrow, or even at some point later this specific year. It does not mean that the Cascadia subduction zone has suddenly become more dangerous than it already was just last week. Scientists studying this data are not issuing any kind of new emergency warning or public alert based directly on this particular study. So what does this discovery actually mean then? The real meaning here is a bit narrower than headlines might suggest, though it is still genuinely important for how scientists understand this region moving forward. The tools that are currently used to help predict Cascadia's future behavior may have been missing a real and important piece of the puzzle this entire time. Researchers are now planning to feed this brand new fragmentation data directly into the hazard forecasting models that already exist. They want to figure out whether these newly discovered fragmented sections of the plate tend to rupture together all at once, or whether they instead tend to rupture separately from each other over time. That specific answer is simply not available yet, and it may take scientists several more years of additional research before they can confirm it clearly. But finding that answer actually matters enormously because it directly changes how a future disaster response would realistically unfold on the ground. Whether Cascadia eventually ruptures as one single massive event, or instead as several smaller separate events spread out over time, changes almost everything about how communities prepare for it. Scientists also want to understand exactly how quickly this fragmentation process continues to develop over time. Some of these fractures might form slowly and gradually across many centuries, while others could potentially develop much more suddenly than that. This distinction matters enormously for anyone trying to forecast future seismic activity along this specific stretch of coastline. Because of this, researchers are already planning to return to the same stretch of ocean floor in the future to gather even more imaging data. Each new survey they conduct adds another valuable data point to a scientific puzzle that has already taken decades to slowly assemble piece by piece. It is also worth remembering that modern seismic imaging technology has improved dramatically since scientists first began studying this exact subduction zone many years ago. What used to look like a single, smooth, uniform slab of rock now reveals a far more complicated and detailed internal structure than anyone originally realized. Importantly, this added complexity does not necessarily mean the region has actually become more dangerous than scientists previously believed. It simply means that the underlying science is now more detailed and arguably more accurate than it was before this discovery. Good science often complicates a simple picture at first, before it eventually produces a clearer and far more reliable one further down the road. It also helps to understand how Cascadia compares to other major subduction zones being studied around the world today. Places like Japan's Nankai Trough, the coastline of Chile, and the fault system running through Sumatra are all similarly dangerous subduction zones that scientists closely monitor. Each of these regions has already produced catastrophic earthquakes in the past, and some of those events happened within recorded human history, meaning we have documented records of what occurred. Scientists who study those specific regions are now beginning to ask an important new question. Could similar plate fragmentation be happening underneath those fault systems as well, just like it is happening beneath Cascadia right now? If fragmentation like this turns out to be a common process that happens at subduction zones all over the world, it could end up reshaping earthquake science far beyond just the Pacific Northwest. That single possibility alone is a big part of why this one specific study has generated so much excitement and discussion across the entire scientific community. A discovery made along one small, relatively unknown stretch of ocean floor could ultimately end up reshaping how scientists forecast earthquakes on a truly global scale. So, what should you actually do with this information if you happen to live anywhere along the Pacific Northwest coastline? Here is the honest truth. This new research does not really change what you should already know and already be doing to prepare. That basic guidance remains exactly the same today as it did before this study was ever even published. If you live in Oregon, Washington, or British Columbia, take a few minutes to know your nearest tsunami evacuation route. You can typically look up and check that specific route in about 5 minutes using your local government's official website. It is also smart to keep a basic emergency kit ready at all times, including enough water, food, and any necessary medication to last your household for several days if needed. This is absolutely not meant to be a reason to panic about something that might not even happen for many more decades into the future. Instead, think of it simply as a reason to understand your own region just a little bit better than you did before watching this video. Real preparedness has never actually depended on knowing the exact moment an earthquake will strike a particular fault line. It depends instead on being ready regardless of the exact timing, which is genuinely a decision that remains entirely within your own control at all times. Let us slow down for a moment and really sit with the bigger picture here, because it is worth thinking about carefully before we wrap up. Subduction zones like this one have quietly built the mountains, the volcanoes, and the coastlines that entire regions of people now proudly call home. For millions and millions of years, these subduction zones have slowly swallowed pieces of ocean floor down into the Earth's mantle, one incredibly slow inch at a time. And for just as long, nobody actually knew exactly how that long, slow process finally comes to an end when a subduction zone eventually shuts down completely. Now, for the very first time in recorded scientific history, we genuinely do know at least part of that answer. It turns out this process does not end with one single, sudden, dramatic bang the way many people might naturally imagine it happening. Instead, it ends slowly, with a tear, piece by piece, fragment by fragment, deep beneath the ocean floor where no one can see it happening with their own eyes. This entire process is happening along a stretch of coastline that most people around the world will genuinely never actually see in person during their entire lifetime. And yet, it directly affects millions of people who live and work above it every single day without even realizing it. Let us also take a moment to really unpack why scientists describe this discovery as being so historically significant within the broader field of earth science. For as long as modern geology has existed as a scientific discipline, researchers have relied heavily on models, simulations, and educated predictions to understand processes that happen far too slowly or far too deep underground for humans to directly witness. A subduction zone, slowing down and eventually shutting off, is exactly the kind of process that normally takes many millions of years to fully complete. That timescale is so incredibly long that no single human lifetime, and really no single human civilization, could ever hope to witness the entire process from beginning to end. Because of that basic reality, scientists have always had to rely on indirect evidence. They study ancient rock formations. They examine old fault lines that are no longer active, and they build computer models based on the physics of how rock and pressure typically behave deep underground. What makes this new discovery so different, and honestly so exciting to so many researchers, is that for the very first time, scientists have captured a real, current, actively developing snapshot of this exact shutdown process happening in real time. It is a little bit like the difference between reading a detailed description of a distant event that happened long ago versus actually watching real footage of that exact same type of event as it happens right in front of you. This also explains why so many different scientists working in completely different specialties are suddenly paying such close attention to this one particular study. Seismologists, the scientists who specifically study earthquakes, are interested because this discovery could directly affect how future earthquakes along Cascadia are eventually forecasted and predicted. Geologists, who study the physical structure and history of rock formations, are interested because this fragmentation process could help explain strange rock formations they have already discovered in completely different parts of the world. And oceanographers, who study the ocean and everything happening beneath its surface, are interested because this entire discovery was only made possible through advanced underwater imaging technology that continues to improve year after year. When a single discovery manages to capture attention across so many different scientific fields all at the same time, it is usually a strong sign that the discovery itself is genuinely significant, and not just something being exaggerated for the sake of dramatic headlines. It is also worth taking a moment to explain a little bit more about how this seismic imaging technology actually works, because understanding the method itself helps explain exactly why scientists trust these new results so strongly. When the research vessel Marcus G. Langseth sailed out to conduct this survey, it towed specialized equipment behind it capable of generating powerful, controlled sound waves. These sound waves travel down through the water, then continue traveling down through layers of rock beneath the ocean floor. As these waves pass through different types of rock, And especially when they hit boundaries where one layer of rock meets another, some of that sound energy bounces back upward toward the surface. Sensitive equipment on the ship then carefully records exactly how long it takes for each of those reflected sound waves to return, along with details about their strength and pattern. By carefully analyzing thousands and thousands of these individual reflections, scientists are able to essentially build a detailed, layered picture of what the rock structure looks like far beneath the ocean floor, without ever having to physically dig down there themselves. This is exactly why scientists often compare this technique to an ultrasound, because doctors use a very similar principle involving sound waves to safely look inside the human body without ever needing to perform surgery first. In this case, the patient just happens to be the entire planet Earth instead of a human body. Understanding this method also helps explain why this particular discovery felt so surprising to the researchers involved, even though many of them have studied this exact region for years. Earlier imaging technology simply was not advanced enough to capture this level of fine detail deep beneath the seafloor. For a long time, the best available images made the Juan de Fuca plate look like one smooth, mostly uniform slab of rock sliding steadily underneath North America. It was only with newer, far more advanced imaging equipment, combined with the specific goals of the Cascadia 21 expedition, that researchers were finally able to see the plate's true, much more fragmented internal structure clearly for the very first time. This is a great example of how scientific progress often works in the real world. It is not always about discovering something that never existed before. Sometimes it is about finally developing the tools necessary to clearly see something that was actually there all along, just previously hidden from view. Let us also spend a little bit more time talking about Brandon Shuck, the lead author of this important new study, because his specific choice of words really does matter here. When he described this discovery as a subduction zone dying piece by piece, rather than collapsing all at once, he was making a very deliberate and carefully chosen comparison. Think about the difference between a building that gradually crumbles apart over many years, piece by piece, versus a building that suddenly collapses all at once in a single dramatic moment. Those two scenarios would require completely different approaches when it comes to safety planning, structural monitoring, and emergency response. The same basic logic applies here to the Cascadia subduction zone. If this entire system were expected to eventually shut down as one single sudden event, scientists would likely approach their forecasting models in one particular way. But if the system is instead more likely to shut down gradually, in smaller separate pieces over a much longer period of time, then forecasting models may need to account for multiple smaller sections of the fault behaving somewhat independently from each other. This distinction may sound like a small technical detail at first, but it could end up having a very real practical impact on how earthquake risk is calculated and communicated to the public in the years ahead. It is also worth pointing out just how rare it truly is for a single scientific paper to receive this much attention and discussion so quickly after being published. Scientific research, especially research involving something as complex and slow-moving as tectonic plates, often takes years or sometimes even decades before its full significance becomes widely understood and accepted throughout the broader scientific community. The fact that this particular study, published in Science Advances, has already generated this much conversation among researchers working in multiple different countries says a great deal about how significant this discovery genuinely is. It is not simply because the images themselves look dramatic and interesting. It is because these new findings directly challenge and update long-standing assumptions that have shaped how earthquake science has been taught and studied for decades. When a new discovery forces experienced scientists to reconsider ideas they have confidently held for a very long time, that is usually one of the clearest signs that real, meaningful scientific progress is actually happening in real time. Now, let us return one more time to the people who actually live above this fault system every single day. Because at the end of the day, this is really their story just as much as it belongs to the scientists studying it. Communities throughout Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia have spent years steadily preparing for the possibility of a major Cascadia earthquake happening at some point during their lifetimes. Schools throughout the region regularly run earthquake preparedness drills with their students. Building codes have been gradually updated over time, specifically to help new buildings better withstand strong, sudden shaking. Emergency response teams routinely train and prepare for large-scale tsunami evacuation scenarios along the coastline. This new discovery does not erase or undo any of that important ongoing preparation work. Instead, it simply adds another valuable piece of information that scientists and emergency planners can eventually use to make their forecasting models even more accurate and reliable moving forward. The overall message here, truly, is not one of fear or panic. It is simply a message about awareness and about the ongoing value of continuing to prepare responsibly for something that could genuinely happen someday, even if nobody can currently predict the exact date or year when it might occur. As we start to bring this story to a close, it is worth pausing again on just how unusual and genuinely rare this entire discovery really is within the world of Earth science. Most significant geological events unfold across timescales that are almost impossible for the human mind to fully picture. We are talking about processes that often take millions of years to complete from start to finish. Catching even a small, meaningful piece of one of these processes actively happening, using real, hard scientific data rather than theoretical models alone, is an incredibly rare achievement for any team of researchers to accomplish. That is precisely why so many scientists working across so many different specialties are describing this particular study as such a genuinely important and exciting moment for the entire field of earthquake science. We are going to continue closely tracking this evolving story as new updates and additional research continue to be published in the months and years ahead. Researchers plan to return to this exact stretch of ocean floor for further imaging surveys, and each new survey they conduct will add another valuable piece to this still developing scientific puzzle. If you want to be among the first to know the very moment this story develops any further, make sure you're subscribed to this channel right now, because we will absolutely be covering every meaningful update as soon as it happens. And once again, if stories like this genuinely matter to you, please take a moment to hit that like button, because it truly does help this video reach far more people who would otherwise likely never come across this important story at all. Before we officially wrap up, we want to ask you one more time, because we genuinely love hearing directly from all of you. Have you personally ever felt an earthquake before, even a small one that barely registered at the time it actually happened? Tell us exactly what it felt like in that moment, and tell us exactly where in the world you happened to be standing when it occurred. Thousands of people have already generously shared their own personal stories in the comment sections of our previous videos, and every single one of those stories genuinely adds something valuable and real to this ongoing conversation. Because right now, at this very moment, hundreds of feet beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean, the ground itself is quietly rewriting old scientific assumptions that have stood unchallenged for decades. It is actively rewriting exactly what scientists thought they previously understood about how our planet truly works deep beneath our feet. That is a genuinely remarkable thing to sit with and think about for a moment. Reaching 5,000 likes on this particular video would genuinely mean a great deal to this channel, and it directly helps us continue creating and researching more videos exactly like this one in the future. So if you made it all the way to this exact point in the video, thank you sincerely and honestly for watching all the way through to the very end. We will absolutely see you again very soon in the next video with another important story that is genuinely worth understanding properly and completely together.